Greetings, Crusaders. It is I, Marshall Bohemond, and well, the one thing I didn't want to happen in Dawn of War 4 happened. Now, okay, I'll tell you all ahead of time. It's not female Space Marines, but it's a problem. I feel like a lot of people, especially newer Warhammer fans, don't want to approach, and it's the problem with just the further enslopification of Warhammer 40,000. But it's a subtle thing. It's a thing that's been going on way longer than wokeness, female custodes, any of that stuff. So okay, let's summarize the whole situation. We had the PC Gamer 2025 previews yesterday. One of the previews was for a new story trailer for Dawn of War 4. And it was, I'll be honest, it was going good. I was liking what I was seeing. And then the Lion showed up. Lionel Johnson, Primarch of the Dark Angels, who are apparently going to have a prominent role in the game. Now, them showing up in the game, as a multiplayer faction, something like that, including Lionel Johnson himself, their Primarch, does not actually bother me. That doesn't bother me at all. But my problem with this is going to happen in the story mode. This is going to be an aspect of the story, and that bothers me. So yeah, as it currently looks, the story is a return to the planet Cronus from Dawn of War Dark Crusade. And you'll be fighting the Necrons again. They'll have the Admech on your side, and there will also be orcs. But now the Dark Angels will be showing up, and with them, their Primarch. I do not believe this has a place in Dawn of War's story. I do not believe the presence of a Primarch has a place there. And the reason is, well, it's quite simple. Dawn of War is the story of the Blood Ravens. It's the story of the Blood Ravens chapter, of their trials, their tribulations, their battles, their victories, and their progression as a character. It's the character that is the chapter and the characters therein. I don't agree with shoving in characters from the wider lore that don't bear relevance to the story of the Blood Ravens. And it's especially kind of hypocritical, or if that's the right word, but it's especially, it doesn't come off as correct when apparently the developers themselves don't want to include the chapter master of the Blood Ravens, Gabriel Angelos, because he'd be too overpowered. But we can have Lionel Johnson, an actual, Primarch, walking around, fighting on your side. But really what it is to me, this is just a symptom of a problem affecting Warhammer that I think goes uncommented on in wider circles. And it's effectively turning Warhammer into what's basically just the MCU now. Warhammer as a setting, and I mean back at its, the earliest foundations of Black Library, when they, started getting their stuff together, started, making narratives, continuing stories, when things like, Gaunt's Ghosts, Eisenhorn, stories like that. Or just pretty much any novel for a good long time in Black Library's history, it really followed a wide and deep approach to writing the Warhammer 40,000 universe. You had your major events, even had books about those major events. But the stories of those major events, like say Hell's Reach, were highly personal stories. They were stories of individual characters experiencing what they go through on a personal level. And you wouldn't get whole, slices of the war. Hell's Reach itself only covers what's effectively one battle of an entire war that doesn't even finish by the end of the book. It's still going. It's just delayed due to the season of fire hitting the planet of Armageddon. The Eisenhorn stories, the stakes in those got high, but they were also contained. They would ultimately be, regional catastrophes. There's a good chance the wider Imperium would never feel the repercussions. The Gaunt's Ghost books are all entirely regulated to the Sabbat worlds, a specific region of space. And all the consequences of the story are consequences that will affect the Sabbat worlds only. And this is what I mean by wide but deep. The stories themselves were deep. The characters and all that, complex characters, really good characters. But overall, they cast a wide net across potential stories. Like individual adventures plucked from various parts of the galaxy that would never impact one another. And there wasn't always, this constant need to make everything feel like everything was the utmost dire circumstances, that if we don't win this battle, everything will fall apart. Unfortunately, though, I have to blame the Horus Heresy for this. The Horus Heresy started being, focusing on, the Primarchs, of course. They were up and about and important movers and shakers of the lore. But there were also incredibly personal stories. Like, the first 3 novels of the Horus Heresy, and a lot of the earlier novels in general, are primarily about lesser in the, in the godlike figure sense characters than the Primarchs. So Garvia Loken is a good example. They were characters who were just, they were just people. Even if they were Astartes, they were just normal people. But as the Horus Heresy went on, and big Primarch fights are what GW began to push, these characters began to be pushed to the back. The Primarchs became the main focus. They became the main characters. And I do think on a level that worked for Horus Heresy because, again, all the Primarchs were up and about. But I don't think it works for 40k. I think reintroducing the Primarchs to 40k has ultimately hurt the setting. We focus now more on Rabute Gilliman. The Lion, a little bit. I mean, Games Workshop has kind of forgotten he released. But they've also, made everything now is a plot by one of the traitor Primarchs. So Gilliman shows up in more and more and more books. And even the stories themselves feel like they have to wrap themselves up in the stories of the Primarchs. We can't have small scale stories anymore. We can't just have a lot of, tales from this part of the galaxy where nothing else matters. Everything has to be a big, massively consequential battle for the fate of the galaxy. And really, the good Black Library novels nowadays, like the really good ones, are the ones that kind of have, the few that have maintained that feeling where, oh, these are just a bunch of guys fighting a war that pretty much no one outside them will probably remember. And it's not the fate of everything at stake. It's just the fate of these characters and their battle. I feel like that was the best kind of storytelling 40k ever had. You could tell so many stories in this big, wide galaxy, but as the focus and the consequences have widened, essentially, and all the stories wrap around a few characters, mostly characters that only show up on tabletop, on top of that, I feel like the scope is narrowed. The scope of this galaxy-wide setting now only revolves around a few characters. A few characters who ultimately are just used over and over and over and over again. And it's becoming boring. It's becoming stale. I mean, by all means, have a core narrative, but understand how the core narrative should just be what, causes wider change to tell small stories. And I feel like this is just part of 40k losing its identity, losing part of what made it great. It's not the 40k universe is not the Marvel universe. It's not the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but Games Workshop seems to treat it like it is. We don't get, Joe Guardsman's squad anymore. We get Rabute Gilliman, we get Belisarius Call, we get, the big chapter masters. Even Space Marine 2, kind of had this, despite being much more in line of the kind of story I'm talking about. We had to have, Marneus Calgar show up. We had to have him show up in the story and be centrally crucial to the plot. And now in Dawn of War 3, we're obviously going to have Titus as the captain now of the second company. So his, what was ultimately Space Marine 1 was a small scale story with only a few Ultramarines showing up. Titus being captain was kind of inconsequential to it all. Now, I predict by Dawn of War, by Space Marine 3, we'll have, the stakes being so high that kind of personal story that Space Marine 1 and 2 were, it won't be that anymore. It'll just be more trying to ape the MCU with this, sweeping story of how the entire galaxy is in danger if this one planet isn't won. And honestly, I feel like in the long run, this is just going to continue to hurt Warhammer 40,000 as a setting. I don't think the setting should be about major important characters in every story, with the smaller stories just revolving around the actions of those major important characters. It should be small stories in little cutout sections of conflicts in the galaxy. And I think Games Workshop should return to that. But unfortunately, I don't think they want to, and that's a problem. Because the higher you make the stakes with every conflict, the higher and higher the apathy becomes in the player and in the reader. Because now you have a problem where the stakes are always so high and the one-upsmanship continues that eventually just becomes tiresome. I mean, just look at Dawn of Fire. Dawn of Fire was a flop. It was supposed to be the Horus Heresy of Warhammer 40k. They cut it down to 9 books because nobody cared. Because they're trying to make the stakes so, on top of the fact the writing was awful. But I would also say the fact that they're trying to make the stakes so apocalyptic now that people just becoming numb to it. And now it's beginning to affect stories that were previously not like that. We're going from the story of the Blood Ravens to the story of Lionel Johnson and the Dark Angels co-starring the Blood Ravens. And I don't like that. I don't like that. And I think a lot of people don't like that. And I think not enough people are speaking up on it. It's just another thing that I believe Games Workshop needs to course correct if they want to begin, trying to make 40K actually last in this attempt to make it a multimedia franchise. Because, we've hit peak superhero fatigue now. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is just a zombie franchise. Trying to ape a zombie franchise is not going to get more people to like it. It's just going to kill your setting faster. But still, that's my rambling about, the state of Warhammer again. I'm Marshall Beaumont. Thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all have a good day. And take care, everyone. Later.